$40 million in gold, and 48 hours to save it. Parker Schnabel's Yukon claim is in full crisis mode. A hidden fault beneath the pit has turned the richest ground of the season into a ticking time bomb. One collapse and the paydirt disappears forever under tons of rock and ice. There's no waiting, no second chances. Parker's bet is as bold as it is insane. $8 million on a single machine. Leviathan, a monstrous, custom-built excavator forged for the brutal mines of Siberia, is being flown, hauled, and assembled in record time. Its job? Carve through unstable ground faster than nature can destroy it. The pressure isn't just underground. A deadly cold front is barreling toward the Yukon, threatening to lock the pay zone in solid permafrost within 72 hours. Engines roar, floodlights blaze, and the crew works without pause, moving mountains of earth in a desperate race against both the fault and the freeze. This is no ordinary mining day. It's a fight for survival, fortune, and the future of Parker's entire operation. One mistake, one delay, and it's over. The gamble starts now, and you won't believe how it ends. Before we dive in, smash that like button and subscribe. The sun never truly rises over this part of the Yukon in winter. It just pushes back the darkness enough to reveal the frost. Parker Schnabel stood alone on the ridge, breath clouding in the cold air, staring down at the pit. The giant wash plant that had roared day and night for weeks now sat dead silent, its conveyors frozen in place, its sluices bone dry. Overnight, the mine had gone from full throttle to zero. The order had come down at 3 a.m., an immediate shutdown. Seismic sensors buried deep beneath the main sluice had detected a catastrophic structural fault running straight under the richest part of the cut. One slip, one tremor, and the entire floor could give way. Parker knew what that meant. The paydirt, a buried reserve holding an estimated $40 million in gold, would be swallowed in seconds, drowned under an icy flood or entombed beneath collapsing gravel walls. The ground itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as the frost worked its way into the fault line. The pay zone sat there like a dare, untouched, shimmering under a thin layer of frozen silt, a fortune hidden just out of reach. The ice along the pit wall glistened like glass, hiding the danger beneath. Around him, the crew moved with a kind of muted urgency, their voices low, their faces drawn tight. In the next 48 hours, the claim would either make them legends or wipe them out. Parker called for the GPR scans, and the images told the story in jagged red lines. A fracture, invisible to the naked eye, ran for nearly 200 feet across the pit, slicing through the heart of the gold zone like a scar. He traced it with his finger, jaw tight. This wasn't erosion from years of mining. No, this had the signature of a sudden thaw cycle, the kind that shifts entire slabs of frozen ground without warning. It reminded the old hands of 1983, the season when the North Cut caved in, swallowing 700 ounces in less than a minute. They still talked about it in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly would wake the ghosts of that disaster. But Parker wasn't interested in folklore. The geological report in his hand was enough to keep him awake at night. It was blunt. Any further excavation could trigger a full-scale collapse. That night, the equipment shed was lit up like a war room. The crew crowded in, mud still frozen on their boots, while Parker spread blueprints and hazard maps across the workbench. His eyes were locked on one page in particular. Not a map of the pit, but of something bigger. He laid it out in 2 words: "We bring in Leviathan." The room went quiet. Leviathan was a monster of a machine. A deep pit hybrid excavator capable of chewing through 15,000 cubic yards of overburden every single day. Built in Germany, tested in the brutal permafrost of Siberia, it had never been used in North America. It was overkill for most operations, which was exactly why Parker wanted it. But bringing it in wasn't cheap. Leasing, transport, assembly. The figure made even Tony Beats whistle when he heard it. $8 million, nearly a quarter of Parker's entire seasonal budget. The gamble was insane. If Leviathan worked, they could carve away the unstable overburden and reach the gold before the fault gave way. If it failed, they'd lose everything, and Parker's operation would never recover. Parker didn't blink. He'd already made his choice. And the moment that choice left his lips, the clock started ticking. Weather reports were already warning of a hard freeze barreling in from the north, a sharp drop in temperature within 72 hours. The cold had settled in with a weight you could feel in your bones, the kind that made metal groan and breath hang thick in the air. Above the claim, the forecast was merciless. If the ground locked up in permafrost before they reached the pay zone, the season would be finished. That gold, $40 million worth of untouched pay dirt, would be sealed under ice until spring, maybe longer. Parker wasn't about to let nature bury his shot at history. The pit became a hive of movement. Excavators roared from one cut to another, hauling rock and stripping frozen layers in a frenzy. Trucks thundered up the ramps, tailgates slamming open as overburden cascaded into spoil piles. In the middle of it all, Parker stood with a clipboard and radio, calculating numbers in real time, 1,000,000 cubic feet. That's what needed to be gone before frost turned the whole claim into a solid tomb. It was a figure so big it almost felt impossible. But not to him. From above, the scale of the operation looked almost surreal. A helicopter camera swept across the pit, revealing streaks of ice creeping down from the north wall like white veins, slowly advancing toward the gold zone. The contrast between the dark, thawed earth and the encroaching frost looked like a battle line being drawn. On the ground, the roar of generators filled every quiet gap, their exhaust curling skyward. Floodlights blazed against the frozen night, illuminating the machinery like weapons on a battlefield. The urgency was palpable. Every shovel load, every truck run counted. The sound of steel biting earth blended with shouted radio calls, the occasional grind of a transmission, the constant hum of diesel engines. Parker didn't rest. He walked the perimeter, checking walls, marking danger zones, pushing his crew harder. The cold snap was coming, and when it hit, the window would slam shut. By the second night, headlights appeared on the horizon, a long convoy snaking its way through the Yukon dark. Flatbeds loaded with massive tarp-covered shapes crawled toward the claim, escorted by heavy-duty cranes and even armed security vehicles. Word had gotten out about the $8 million gamble, and Parker wasn't taking chances with a piece of equipment this rare. When the tarps came off, the crew finally saw Leviathan in full. It dwarfed everything in sight, a mechanical colossus with a boom so long it seemed to block out the floodlights. Its bucket was absurd, big enough to swallow a pickup truck whole. The steel plating glinted under the artificial lights, every weld a testament to its custom engineering. Parker climbed the ladder to the cab, boots clanging on the steel rungs. Inside, the controls were a mix of brute force and precision. Twin joysticks for the massive arms, foot pedals for swing and throttle, and a display showing angles, load weight, and hydraulic pressure. He gripped the controls, testing the swing as diesel fumes curled from the twin stacks behind him. The hum of its engine wasn't like anything they'd heard, deeper, heavier, almost like a living thing clearing its throat. The crew gathered along the safety line, watching in silence. Parker swung the boom out over the cut, lined up the bucket, and dropped it. In one clean motion, the ground shuddered, and 40 tons of frozen earth rose in Leviathan's jaws. It was an opening move that said everything. This machine wasn't here to play. Within hours of operation, Leviathan was doing exactly what Parker had gambled on, moving earth at a speed no other excavator on site could match. But then something unexpected appeared. As the massive bucket tore into the ground, it exposed a layer unlike anything marked on the surveys. An ancient gravel band, tightly compacted and darker than the surrounding soil. It ran like a ribbon across the face of the cut, glinting faintly under the work lights. The find sparked whispers on the radios. Old miners' journals, tattered, leather-bound relics Parker had read years ago, spoke of a gold shelf hidden somewhere in this valley. A layer of earth so rich it could set a man for life. Most dismissed it as legend, but standing here now, Parker wasn't so sure. He ordered samples rushed to the plant for testing. The results came back faster than expected. Over $120 worth of gold per yard. That wasn't just good. It was the kind of number that could redefine a season. Every load from that layer was a jackpot. But with the discovery came risk. Disturbing the shelf meant cutting deeper into the unstable zone, and the geologists didn't like it. The fault above them was already under tension. Pulling out the material beneath could accelerate its collapse. Parker weighed their words, his eyes fixed on the gleam of the newly exposed pay. He knew exactly what they were saying, and he also knew what walking away would cost. After a moment's silence, his decision came sharp and without hesitation. Shift to extraction mode. The order crackled over the radios, and instantly the sight changed. Trucks began hauling directly from Leviathan's teeth to the plant. Excavators cleared a wider path for the big machine. Loaders darted in and out like worker bees. Leviathan's bucket slammed into the gold shelf again, pulling out massive scoops of pay that sparkled under the lights even before they hit the plant's hopper. The warning signs from the fault line were still there. Occasional groans from the wall, a small cascade of loose rock tumbling into the cut. But no one slowed down. Every hour they dug here was a race not just against the coming frost, but against the earth itself, as if the gold was trying to slip back into hiding before it could be claimed. And Parker wasn't about to let it. That resolve carried them deep into the night shift, machines grinding under floodlights, breath steaming in the frigid air. The pit was alive with motion until the sound changed. A deeper, heavier groan rolled out from the north face, silencing engines mid-rev. Before anyone could call it, the wall tore loose. Rock and ice broke free in a thunderous wave, slamming into the main hall road like a landslide, choking it under a mass of debris. Floodlights cut through the dust cloud, revealing 2 haul trucks stranded on the far side, their operators shouting over the radios. The avalanche of earth wasn't just blocking the route, it was pressing dangerously close to the pay zone. Parker didn't hesitate. He bounded up Leviathan's ladder and dropped into the seat, throttling the engine to life. The massive machine roared, its hydraulic arms flexing as he swung the boom toward the buried road. The first bucketful tore away at the pile, revealing mangled sections of safety railing and frozen chunks of ice. Crew radios exploded with rapid-fire chatter. Spotters calling distances, shovel operators coordinating with Parker's every move, all while the ominous creak of shifting rock echoed through the pit. Every scoop counted. The trapped trucks were loaded with critical material from the gold shelf. If they stayed buried, the operation stalled, and every passing minute let the cold close in tighter. Leviathan's steel bucket slammed into the debris, hurling tons of frozen rubble aside. The pit wall loomed overhead, unstable and threatening, but Parker didn't slow. The air was thick with dust and diesel fumes, the ground vibrating under the machine's relentless drive. Finally, the road broke open, and the first truck rolled through, its operator white-knuckled on the wheel. The second followed close behind, the crew's collective exhale audible over the comms. Without missing a beat, Parker switched Leviathan back into full operational mode. The waste rock from the collapse was cleared to the spoil pile, while fresh high-grade pay from the gold shelf began moving again. But the delay had burned precious hours, and the danger hadn't passed. The crew huddled in a quick meeting at the plant, grease-streaked and exhausted, and hammered out a new plan. 2 shifts, 12 hours each, with no downtime. Leviathan would run until something broke, and if it did, repairs would happen on the spot. The change turned the site into a 24-hour siege. Machines moved under floodlights at night, and the weak winter sun by day, the noise never stopping. The cost was staggering, over $50,000 a day in fuel, labor, and maintenance. But the payoff was worth it. Even from space, the difference was visible. Satellite images showed the pit widening and deepening at a pace that defied belief. Dark cuts in the earth, growing like a spreading wound. The pace was unsustainable, but Parker wasn't looking weeks ahead. He was looking hours ahead. And in those hours, every ounce mattered. It was during one of those relentless pushes that Leviathan's bucket hit something unexpected. The sound was different. Not the crunch of frozen gravel, but a hollow, resonant thud. Parker eased back, swung the boom again, and this time the bucket punched straight through into open air. The ground beneath gave way, revealing a yawning cavity no one had mapped. The lights from the excavator's boom illuminated the walls of the hollow, and they glittered faintly. The crew crowded near the edge, peering down into the natural chamber. Centuries of freeze and thaw had created a gold trap, a place where heavy flakes and chunky nuggets had settled and stayed, undisturbed. It was a geological jackpot. Samples were rushed to the pan, and what came out made even the veterans go silent. Over 6 ounces per yard. Numbers like that didn't just happen. This was the kind of find that miners dreamed of and never saw. Whispers started immediately, some calling it the richest pocket Parker had ever touched, others saying it was the kind of strike you only see once in a lifetime. But Parker's eyes weren't on the gold. They were on the wall above them. The fault was shifting again. The collapse earlier had weakened more than just the road. The entire north section was under pressure. And now, with a hollow void beneath, it could give way catastrophically. Parker stayed quiet for a moment, one hand gripping the rail as he looked into the chamber. The gold was there, just waiting to be pulled out. But so was the danger. And he knew the next move could define everything that came after. His jaw tightened. "Run it straight to the plant," he said finally. The chamber was unlike anything they had mined before. Every bucket load pulled from it seemed heavier, richer, more alive with promise. No one spoke unless they had to. The constant grind of conveyors and the low rumble of Leviathan's hydraulics were the only sounds, underscored by the clatter of pay dirt being fed directly into the plant. Every scoop from the bucket went straight to the shaker deck. There was no point in stockpiling. This was gold too rich to sit idle. By midnight, the recovery numbers were climbing like a rocket. Normally, they measured output by the ounce per hour. Now they were counting by the pound. The gold recovery rate had tripled almost instantly, sluice mats glittering with yellow as crew members worked the cleanup station in a frenzy. The tally boards began ticking toward the impossible, the $40 million target they had only dared to hope for at the start of the season. Leviathan was being pushed harder than it had ever been pushed before. Hydraulic arms flexed and groaned, bucket pins squealed under strain, and the massive steel tracks clanked over rock like the footsteps of some relentless beast. Parker stayed in the cab, his eyes flicking between the bucket's edge and the cracks forming in the wall above. He saw the way the frozen layers flexed, as if they were breathing. Not just hairline fractures now, but visible lines running jagged down the face of the pit. Still, he didn't slow. Every load that came out was another step closer to finishing before the earth decided to swallow the rest. They were too close now. The gold was there. The danger was there. Parker had made his choice. Dig until there was nothing left to dig. The air in the pit was different as they neared the end. Heavy, still, with a tension that pressed down on everyone. They had maybe 200 yards of pay left, a few dozen bucket loads at most. The first deep, resonant groan rolled through the ground like a low thunder. The wall was talking now, warning them. Parker's voice crackled over the radio, low but sharp. Non-essential crew out. Now. Machines peeled away from the cut, leaving only Leviathan, a pair of loaders, and the trucks waiting to make the last hauls. Spotters positioned themselves like sentinels along the rim, radios ready, eyes locked on the wall. Every movement of rock, every shift in the frost was reported instantly. Parker's hands moved on instinct, scooping the last pockets with surgical precision. The trucks rolled out, loaded heavy, suspensions sagging under the weight. The sound of the wall shifting became constant, a dry crackle punctuated by deep rumbles. The final bucket bit into the pay zone and came up heavy. The truck backed in, took the load, and roared up the ramp. It had barely cleared the last bend when the mountain moved. A deafening crack split the night, followed by a roar so loud it drowned out the engines. The wall gave way in a single devastating collapse, a tide of rock, ice, and debris slamming into the cut. The air turned to dust, swallowing the floodlights in a choking haze. The noise was so overwhelming it felt like the ground itself was screaming. When the dust began to settle, the pay zone was gone, buried under thousands of tons of rubble. Parker stood at the edge, Leviathan idling behind him, its steel smeared with dirt and gold dust, its massive frame trembling from the impact. The treasure they had chased all season was now sealed away forever, except for the part they had just pulled out. Hours later, the cleanup numbers came in. The scale groaned under the weight of bar after bar of refined gold, each one gleaming in the cold light of the workshop. The total, just over $40 million. Enough to make the gamble worth it, enough to make the damage, the cost, and the danger feel justified. But the machine that had made it possible was finished. Leviathan's hydraulic system had been pushed beyond its limits. Hairline cracks in the boom, worn seals, and overheated pumps meant it would never run the same again. It had been brought here for one purpose, and it had delivered, but at the cost of its own life. Parker, exhausted and still wearing the same coat from 3 days ago, finally allowed himself a thin smile. "We had minutes," he admitted to the crew, "minutes before it all came down." Under the midnight sun, they gathered by the plant, not for a speech, not for ceremony, but to raise a toast. The glasses clinked, the gold bars gleamed on the table beside them, and for the first time in days, the claim was quiet. The story would spread fast, about the $8 million machine that tore into frozen ground and saved $40 million worth of gold from the jaws of the Yukon. A legend born not in luck, but in risk, grit, and the refusal to stop digging. If you lived through that rush with us, smash that like button and subscribe, because the next strike could be bigger, riskier, and worth more than anything Parker's ever seen.